Hey guys, Brad from simpleguitar.com here, and today we're going to be talking about guitar amps. But if you've never been here, welcome to my channel for simpleguitar.com. Please subscribe, hit the bell notification so that you'll be notified every week when new videos come out, and also leave me a comment once you subscribe. Say, I subscribed, and I'll get down there and I'll thank you in the comments. Now, when it comes to guitar amps, especially for beginner guitar players, it can be kind of confusing and overwhelming. So today we're going to talk a little bit about different kinds of amps, and then I'm also going to show you how to get your amp to sound good, no matter what amp you're on. A common misconception that a lot of guitar players have, and I did this when I was starting out too, so it's not a big deal, everybody does this, is I thought, if I find a setting on my amp that I like, if I get my knobs right where I want them and I think it sounds good, then when I go to my friend's house and play on his amp, I can set my knobs to the exact same thing and it should sound good, right? And that's not true. So we're going to talk about why that is and how to get any amp that you play to sound good. Now, when it comes to different types of amplifiers, there are primarily solid state amps and tube amps. Okay, these are the two most important ones that we're going to talk about today. Now, I know that there are more than that. I have a hybrid amp that's a hybrid between a solid state and a tube. And I have a Kemper Profiler, which is a more digital amp or a profiling amp or a modeling amp. These new digital amps are getting to be really, really good and are comparable to really good amps, really good tube amps or solid state amps. But today we're just going to be talking about solid state and tube amps. Otherwise, this is going to take a long time because there's so much that we could cover. So I'll do future videos about different kinds of amps, and maybe we'll dive into some more digital amps and hybrid amps and stuff like that. So what I have with me right here, this is a solid state amp. And what that means is this amp takes the signal from your electric guitar and it goes through the cable, you plug it into the amp, and then the amp gets its amplification from transistors, okay? So these are solid state electronics that give it its power, and it can be really handy. Now, these solid state amps can be really handy for a lot of people. They have a lot of great headroom, meaning you can get a clean sound and get really loud with that clean sound. Usually with tube amps, you get a clean sound, and as you go louder, that sound distorts. It starts to break up and sound crunchy, okay? And with solid state amps, you don't get that. They're also lighter. So solid state amps are a lot lighter than tube amps, and they're cheaper. So you can get your hands on one relatively simply, which is why we're going to look at this one today, because it's pretty similar to what most people starting out would be able to get their hands on right away. But we're also going to look at a tube amp that I've got here with me, and we're going to look at the differences in sound and how the different settings work on that too. I'm going to do everything today switching between my neck pickup on my Telecaster here and my bridge pickup here, just by switching between, because you're going to get a different sound. And we could really dive in, we could do the middle setting too, but it's going to take too long. So let's just do the neck setting and the bridge setting, and we'll see how those different pickups sound. So right now I have this amp and it has two channels. It has a clean channel and it has an overdrive channel or a distorted channel. So the clean channel sounds nice and clean like this, and I'm on my neck pickup. And my bridge pickup. But if I switch over to my overdrive channel, then it sounds distorted. So a lot of amps will have different channels like that, and each channel will have kind of its own sound or its own voice, okay? So that's the main difference with the sounds on this amp, is we're gonna have our clean sound and we're gonna have our distorted sound. But it's not just about that. There's also the equalization of the sound of the amplifier, okay? So if you look at your amp, you're gonna see knobs that will say something like low or bass, and you'll have mid or sometimes you don't even have a mid one, and you'll have treble or high. Okay, so these are your different frequencies. And what that means is your frequencies, all sound is on a spectrum. And the higher the sound, the higher the frequencies. And that means the faster the vibration that sound causes. And the lower the frequency, the slower the vibration that sound causes. So everything covers this wide variety, but certain instruments and certain sounds will have more low or more mid or more high depending on that instrument. And on our guitar amp, we can affect how the low frequencies are, if they're neutral, if we add in more low frequencies, or if we take out low frequencies. And the same thing with our mids and our trebles, our mids and highs. We can take out our mid frequencies, or we can crank them up and add more in. And same thing with high, we can take out high frequencies, we can add them in, and we can really mess with how the amp sounds. So let's zoom in on this, and I'll show you on the clean channel how that is going to affect the sound. And you can use the same principles on any amp to get a good sound out of any amp that you play. Okay, so right here, I am zoomed in on the clean channel of this amp. Okay, and I've got my guitar turned up. I'm on the clean channel. So this knob right here, this is the volume for my clean channel, okay? And that's going to affect how loud it is, okay? So if you wanna do this quiet, you turn it down, or you turn it up if you wanna do it loud, okay? But I'm gonna leave it about there, because what we wanna focus on right now is the equalization. So we have our treble knob, which is our high frequencies. We have our mid knob, which is our middle frequencies, and the bass knob, which is our low bass frequencies. Now, whatever you do, whenever you're working with an amplifier, whether it's a new amplifier, you're trying to get it to sound good, you want to turn your knobs so that they're pointing at 12 o'clock like this, okay? When your knobs for your EQ are pointed at 12 o'clock, that is the default standard sound that the amp manufacturer made for the amp. So this is how the amp is, quote unquote, supposed to sound with the knobs all turned up at 12, okay? So with that, this is how it sounds on my neck pickup. And this is how it sounds on my bridge pickup. So let's start messing with these. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna take the treble and we're gonna crank up the treble quite a bit so you can hear how this affects the sound. This is my neck pickup. And this is my bridge pickup. Now let's take out the treble. I'm gonna turn it all the way down. And this is how it sounds on my neck pickup. This is my bridge pickup. Okay, so let's put that back at 12 o'clock. And now let's mess with the mids, okay? With the mids, let's crank that up so you can hear how these mids sound when we add a whole bunch in. This is the neck pickup. And this is the bridge pickup. Okay, now let's take out the mids all the way, which this is something when I played in jazz band in high school, we did cut the mids quite a bit because if you're playing in a group with saxophones, the mid range of a guitar can actually cancel out the sound of the saxophone. So if you're playing jazz or you're playing with horns, don't crank up your mids because then no one will hear the saxes. It's kind of funny. Anyway, so this is how my neck pickup sounds with no mids. this is how it sounds on my bridge pickup. Okay, so let's put that back at 12. And now let's mess with the bass. Let's crank up the bass so you can hear how these low frequencies getting added in sound. And this is my neck pickup. And this is the bridge pickup. Okay, now let's take them out. Let's crank the bass all the way down. And this is the neck pickup. And this is the bridge pickup. Okay, so each one of these knobs will affect how it sounds. And so you start with it at 12 o'clock, and then you turn it up and see how it affects the sound, or turn it down and see how it affects the sound. Something that I usually like to do is I like to add a little bit more highs because it makes it sound a little bit more clear, but I like a little bit of beefiness from the bass. And sometimes I cut the mids a little bit. I used to cut them a lot more, but I don't anymore. So this is how, let's see how this sounds on my neck pickup. And this is the bridge. So that way you can start to see a little bit about how these different equalization settings, the EQ settings with your bass frequencies, your middle frequencies, and your treble or high frequencies will affect your sound. And it's important because if I went to another amp and I set these three, my bass, my treble, and my mid to sound to the exact same place, it's going to sound totally different. So if you get these set on your amp and you're like, I love that sound, and then you go to your friend's amp and you try doing it, it's not going to sound the same. So that's why you need to understand that you start at 12 o'clock and then you can change by adding that frequency in or taking it away. And it, you know, what guitar you're playing or what pickup you're playing on your guitar, that's all going to affect it too. But it is important to understand with your amp, you don't need to just cut one all the way out or boost one all the way or something. Start at 12 o'clock. That's your default home bass sound for that amp. And then you can adjust those accordingly as you think it sounds better. Now let's switch over to a tube amp and see how that works. Okay, so I've got a tube amp set up here. This is an old PV tube amp, and I am plugged into the normal channel here. There's also a bright channel, but today we're just going to look at this normal channel. And so in this, and this is how it'll typically look on a tube amp. All the way over here, this is the master gain or the master volume, okay? And so that's your main volume, how loud or how quiet it'll be. But each channel of the amp, the bright channel and the normal channel, have a gain knob as well. Now, gain is a little bit different than volume. Some people treat it like a volume knob, but really it's more of a sensitivity knob, okay? So if you turn up the gain on this, then the amp is more sensitive to how loud or how quiet your playing is. If it's turned down, it's less sensitive, okay? So on a tube amp, for example, right now I've got my gain set halfway. So if I play kind of light, and I'm on my neck pickup right now, it sounds nice and clean and good, right? And if I strum harder, still pretty clean. But if I turn up this gain knob here, it's going to start to break up the sound more when I play, okay? So if I play lightly, like this, So if I play lightly, I can still get a clean sound. But with my guitar cranked up all the way, turned up all the way, I can play louder. And I get more distortion, more overdrive. This is it cranked up all the way. But again, how loud my sound is coming from the guitar will affect this. So even if I leave it cranked up all the way like this, and I just turn up the volume on my guitar a little bit, then I'm back to having a clean sound. And this is one reason why so many guitar players love tube amps. One, they do have a little bit warmer sound to it. Solid state amps, because it's solid state transistors that are powering the amp, it tends to have a kind of cold, lifeless sound to it. That's just how some people would describe it. It's not that one is better than the other. It's that they have different uses, and it depends on your preference too. I like solid state amps for certain things, and I love tube amps for other things. But with the tube amp, it can also be way more versatile because I can affect the sound, like I just showed you, by turning my guitar up or down, and I can get more distortion or less distortion depending on how I play. With a solid state amp, it doesn't do that at all. With a solid state amp, it doesn't matter how loud I play, it'll stay clean unless I'm going through a distorted channel. Okay, so let's look really quickly at the different frequencies here. So we have our bass, our middle, and our treble. And I'm going to turn this back down to 5, okay? So we are still going to be there. And let's crank up the bass and see how this affects the tone. This is my bridge pickup. This is my neck pickup. Now let's cut the bass. We're going to take it all the way out. Now this is my bridge pickup. Okay, now let's turn that back up. And let's take out boost the middle. Let's take the middle and crank it all the way up. So this is your middle frequencies on my neck pickup. And this is my bridge pickup. Now I'm gonna take out the mids all the way, okay? And that sounds like this on my bridge pickup. And this is the neck pickup. Okay, so now let's put that back up. And let's crank up our treble or our high frequency so you can hear how that affects. This is my bridge pickup. And this is the neck pickup. So now the treble is all the way out, and this is the neck pickup. And this is the bridge pickup. Okay, so let's go back to 12 o'clock with all of them. And this is how the manufacturer meant the amp to sound on the bridge pickup. And my neck pickup. So once you're familiar with that, then you can start messing around with your knobs and turning stuff up and down. And then you can see how that sounds. And so you mess around with the knobs, you try out the different settings, but the whole time, the most important thing isn't where the knobs are sitting, it's you listening to how it affects the sound. Because when you go from one amp to another amp, what you take with you is your ears. The sound is going to be different on each amp. And so you have to listen and hear how the treble and the bass and the mid frequencies will affect the sound so that you can find the kind of sound that you like. All right, guys, so that's a lot of fun. Guitar amps are really cool, and when you're playing electric guitar especially, it can really be as much of your instrument as the guitar is itself and affect the sound that you get. But I hope that makes it clearer. So remember, when you're working with your amp, that you start with your EQ knobs, your equalization knobs, your bass, middle, and treble at 12 o'clock. Start with them straight up and down, and then affect by adding or taking away those frequencies, and that'll change the sound of the amp, okay? And you can mess around with that and find sounds that you like. Now you've seen a little bit about how a tube amp works and how a solid state amp works. Personally, I prefer tube amps more. Most guitar players do, but these digital amps that come out today are amazing. I love my Kemper that I have sitting over here. It's amazing. This way though, when you're looking for your first amp, a lot of people will go with a solid state because they're cheaper first, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that they're worse or that they sound worse or anything. They just are cheaper because they're cheaper to manufacture. So you go and you can get a solid state tube amp and understand how you're going to get a good sound out of it, or you can get a tube amp and you can understand how you can make that one sound the way that you want it to sound as well. But like I said, every amp is different. It's just like every guitar sounds differently. Every amp sounds different too. And then a different guitar with different pickups will sound different in the same amp, you know? So if I were to take one of my other guitars and plug it into this amp, it would sound totally different. And so use that, experiment, mess around, maybe go to a music shop and try out the different amps and start with all your EQ at 12 o'clock and try getting the sound that you like out of it by messing with the EQ. But I hope that clears it up. If you have any questions still about how to get your amp to sound good or how amps work, leave a question down in the comments and I will get to you and help you out with that. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so that you don't miss any videos as these come out every single week. But I hope that helps you guys out with your amps today. And if you haven't already, go to simpleguitar.com/top10 to download your free guide on the top 10 things to learn on guitar first. One of those things in that guide was how to use your amp and how to get a good sound out of your amp. So I hope this video helped you with that today. Like I said, don't forget to subscribe. Leave a comment below saying that you did subscribe, or leave a comment with any questions you may have. Get your guide at simpleguitar.com/top10. And I will see you guys in the next video.